All right, so we have already talked about photosynthesis. We have talked about the way that plants take the energy from the sun and turn it into food that they can use or that, of course, we can use. Now let's talk about the reverse of that, and that is called cellular respiration. Okay, so what exactly is it? Okay, after you eat, your body breaks down the food and releases the sugars or the glucose. And that process where your cells are getting energy from the glucose is cellular respiration. The cells break down glucose and other molecules that are in the food using oxygen to do that, and they release energy. Now, because living things like you and I need a constant supply of energy, the cells of all living things carry out cellular respiration constantly. It's continuously going on. So let's put this kind of in perspective. Let's develop an analogy here. Imagine you have money in a savings account. If you want to buy something, you get the money. Your body stores and uses energy in a similar way. When you eat, your body adds that energy by storing glucose. When your cells then need the energy, they take it and they break down the glucose through the process of cellular respiration, and they get that energy that they need. There's a little bit of a misconception here with respiration. Respiration means breathing, moving air in and out of the lungs. Now, of course, we need that because those lungs bring in oxygen that get carried to the cells, and the cells need oxygen for that process of cellular respiration. And of course, when we breathe out, we're removing waste products from cellular respiration, which happen to be carbon dioxide. Okay, now just like photosynthesis had two stages, so does cellular respiration. In stage one, that is occurring in the cytoplasm of the cell. The molecules of the glucose get broken down into smaller molecules. Don't need oxygen at this point. And at that point, only a small amount of energy is being released by breaking down the glucose. Now, in the second stage of cellular respiration, that's happening in the mitochondria, in our little powerhouses of the cell. The smaller molecules, they are broken down even more. Now, that does require oxygen, and that releases a lot of energy that the cell can use for all of its activities, whatever it needs to do. Let's take a look at the equation of cellular respiration. Carbon dioxide and water is using energy, and we're ending up, let me take a step back there for a second. That is the equation for photosynthesis. Oops, sorry. Carbon dioxide and water using the light energy from the sun, and we are getting sugar and oxygen. Now, for cellular respiration, the raw materials that we need are glucose, the sugar, and oxygen. And again, we get that glucose from foods that we eat. Plants and other organisms, those autotrophs, have to carry out photosynthesis to get their own glucose. And the oxygen needed for cellular respiration is in the air or the water surrounding the organism. So when we compare those two processes, they're essentially opposite reactions. And they form a cycle that keep the levels of oxygen and carbon dioxide fairly constant in the atmosphere. Now, there's also a process called fermentation. Some organisms can live without oxygen, but we still need oxygen to carry out that process of cellular respiration. So those organisms that don't have oxygen use a process called fermentation, where energy is being released, but oxygen isn't required. And one drawback of fermentation is that we don't get as much energy as we would if cellular respiration were being used. Now, when we bake bread and we used yeast, that fermentation is occurring. A lot of other single-celled organisms other than yeast also use fermentation. Some products of fermentation are alcohol, carbon dioxide, and again, a small amount of energy. Now, let's think of a time that you ran as fast as you can and as hard as you could. And you were breathing very, very quickly. But no matter how much you breathe, your muscles are not going to get the oxygen fast enough to replace the oxygen that's being used to produce the energy that they need. Because your cells lack oxygen, fermentation starts. So again, what we would like for cellular respiration to happen, fermentation happens when there's not enough oxygen. Your muscles got the energy that they needed, but they did it without using oxygen. Now, one product of that type of fermentation is lactic acid, and that's actually why your muscles get sore, because of the buildup of lactic acid. Okay, hope that helps. Tells you a little bit more about cellular respiration, which is just the opposite of photosynthesis.